Hi everyone, my name is Bahar and I'm going to be doing The Outsiders, chapters 1 through 6 lesson by S.E. Hinton. So, first I'm going to do a little introduction on the author, S.E. Hinton. She was a teenage girl just like us when she wrote this book. She was inspired by what she saw around her and things going on in her own life in general to write the story The Outsiders. A fun fact about her is that Hinton's publishers decided that Hinton should publish her novel under the name S.E. Hinton in order to hide her gender, in order to hide that she was a girl. They worried that readers would not respect The Outsiders, which features male protagonists and violent situations, if they knew a woman wrote it. Okay, now I'm going to go over a summary of chapters 1 through 3. In chapters 1 through 3, Ponyboy is established as the main character, and other characters, including his gang of friends, which are the Greasers, such as Johnny, Soda Pop, and Derry. Ponyboy, Johnny, and Dally go to the movies and meet Cherry, who is a Soch. And remember, Soches are the class that have more money and are more rich. Later, Johnny and Ponyboy get jumped, which means attacked, by a gang of Soches, and Johnny kills one out of self-defense. Now I'm going to summarize chapters 4 through 6. After Johnny kills that Soch in self-defense, Johnny and Ponyboy run away to the country and hide in a church to avoid the law and police. When Dally comes to visit them, the church catches on fire and Ponyboy and Johnny run in to save some kids who got stuck. Because of that, Johnny gets hurt and is sent to the hospital. You may have noticed that in the book The Outsiders, the culture and the language and the social structures are a little different than America now. That's because the book was set in the 1960s. So I'm going to go over what America was like in the 1960s. So, the main conflict in The Outsiders is a class struggle. You may have noticed the words greasers and Soches. Greasers were lower class, they were thought to be dirty, poorly educated, and not very mindful. Soches were thought to be rich, well educated, and clean, and they were often looked up to. This is because it was based on American culture at the time, which was a conflict between conservative and rebellious ideas. If you pay some attention to the way that greasers act and Soches act, you may notice that Soches are more conservative and greasers are more rebellious. So, what do the greasers believe in? You may have seen that the greasers have a big sense of brotherhood, loyalty to their families and the people they are friends with, and that they also are more prone to committing crimes in order to keep each other safe. Their beliefs are more rebellious rather than conservative. So I want you to think about this for yourself. What are some conservative and rebellious ideas that you see around you? If you don't know what conservative means the more to keep traditional ideas and traditional practices, while rebellious means going against tradition, going against authority, breaking some ideas or rules. Okay, one of the big things in the 1960s was the civil rights movement. During the 1960s, the civil rights movement was continued from when it was started in the 1950s. The civil rights movement revolved around the fight for equality for African Americans by countering racist laws like segregation and racial discrimination. Many people showed their beliefs by participating in protests, marches, sit ins, and other forms of peaceful groups. Another big thing was the women's rights movement, which was around the same time of the civil rights movement. The 1963 Equal Pay Act was passed, which guaranteed women better wages or pays for their job. Before that, women often received less than males for the same job. This was a landmark for feminism in America and was a movement against systematic misogyny or discrimination against women. So, misogyny means discrimination against women. So, the book was set in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is in the southern area of the United States, which has a slightly different culture than the northern areas of the United States. So, you may have noticed that there are some words that are very different than the words we use currently. That's because they are slang from the 1960s. Slang are words that are specific to youth culture and are not used with adults, parents, or teachers. So I'm going to go over a long list of different slang terms that are used in The Outsiders and use them in a sentence. So the first one is booze. Booze is any form of alcohol, particularly beer, in The Outsiders, because it is cheaper. To be boozed up means to be in an intoxicated state or to be drunk. In the sentence, he brought the booze to the party and quickly got boozed up. So this means that he brought the alcohol to the party and he got drunk. Next, abroad. Abroad is an attractive girl. An example in a sentence is the two broads were sitting in front of him at the movie theater. The third one is the cooler. The cooler means jail. So an example in a sentence is, after being caught by the police, Dally was sent to the cooler. So Dally was sent to jail. And the fourth one is a cancer stick. A cancer stick is a cigarette. And this actually came to be because cigarettes are known to cause cancer, so people began calling them cancer sticks. In a sentence, Lola took out a cancer stick to smoke on her break. A Chessy cat. A Chessy cat is a reference to the Cheshire Cat, which is a cartoon cat from a movie called Alice in Wonderland, known for its wide smile. To smile or grin like a Chessy cat means to smile a smug, wide, or big smile. Hacked off. Hacked off means to be angry. So an example in the sentence is, he's been really hacked off at his brother for losing his book. The next one is a heater. A heater means a handgun. An example in a sentence is, does he carry a heater with him? So this just means, does he carry a gun with him? Next is the fuzz. The fuzz means police or law enforcement. An example in a sentence is, we've got to get out of here before the fuzz show up and arrest us. The next one is jumped. Jumped means to be attacked or robbed or stolen from. So an example in a sentence is, the two boys got jumped and had most of their money stolen. So this sentence means that the two boys got attacked and had most of their money stolen. Next, to lift or shoplift. This means to steal or pickpocket. An example in a sentence is, she lifted the dress from a department store and was later arrested. So this just means that she stole the dress. Next is lighting up. Lighting up means smoking. So an example in a sentence is that after a stressful night, my aunt lit up a cigarette on the porch. Next is tough. Tough means something cool, and it's a misspelling of the word originally tough, which is Tough. So an example would be, the bright blue Mustang, which is a car, looked quite tough, which means just cool. The opposite of tough is rank. Rank means something uncool. The old beat-up car was rank, so it was not cool. Next, rolled. To be rolled means to have been robbed from or to have robbed. So an example would be, after being jumped, attacked, the boys were rolled, so they were robbed from. Now for the last three. Switchblade. A switchblade is a hand knife used to defend or show off, usually opening at the push of a button. Sometimes greasers carried switchblades in order to show off their strength or dominance. An example in a sentence would be, to keep himself safe, he constantly carried a switchblade with him. The next one is loan it. To loan it means to do something alone. An example would be, as nobody else enjoyed the opera, she decided to loan it. Last, woofin'. Woofin' means to be kidding or to be joking. In the sentence, it would be, don't be angry at her, she was just woofin'. She was just joking, basically. Okay, now I'm going to go over some grammar. We're going to be looking at active voice versus passive voice. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence perform or does the action. Passive voice is when the subject of the sentence receives the verb action. So these two sentences have the same meaning, but one of them is going to be in active voice and the other is going to be in passive voice. So here, Gary gives Ponyboy the money. Here, the subject performs the verb gives. In passive voice, the same meaning sentence is, the money is given to Ponyboy by Derry. In this case, the subject now, which is the money, is receiving the verb given. The money is given to Ponyboy by Derry. So here's how to form the active. First, you see we have the subject. The subject is directly doing this verb, and then we see a noun. So Cherry throws the ball. Cherry is the subject directly doing the verb throws and the ball. Here's how to form the passive voice. In the passive voice, the verb phrase includes a form of to be and a past participle. So remember from our last lessons that a past participle is generally a verb that ends in ed. Here are the forms of the to be in present tense and past simple. So here's an example of passive voice. The ball, which is the subject, was, which is the conjugation of to be using past simple it, was tossed. And tossed is a past participle of the verb to toss. As you can see here, the ball is receiving the action, which is to toss or tossed. So that kind of sentence that I just showed you was passive voice. But we can make it a little different by adding a prepositional phrase. With a prepositional phrase, it can look like this. The ball was thrown by Zahra. By is the prepositional phrase, and it's showing us that the ball, which is the new subject, is receiving the action caused by Zahra. As you can see in some of these passive voice examples, by is the prepositional phrase. So this is another example of active voice. The girl walked on the path. The girl is the subject and she is directly doing the action walked. Next, this is the same sentence meaning but in passive voice. The path was walked on by the girl. As you can see, was is that conjugation of the verb to be, and walked is the past participle of the verb to walk. The path is receiving the action walked. So why does it matter? When should we use passive voice and when should we use active voice? Here's an example of when active voice is more clear than passive voice. So these two sentences essentially have the same meaning, but one of them makes more sense than the other. I want you to think about it after I read these two. So in active voice, the criminal escaped from jail. That same sentence in passive voice would be, jail was escaped by the criminal. Which two of these two sentences make more sense? I think the active voice. Even though they both have the same meaning, active voice directly states what the criminal is doing and is a lot more clear to the reader. So now we're going to be doing some sentence practice. I want you to think about this on your own after I read the sentence and think if it's passive or active. I will be going over the answers. So the first one is, the snake delivers venom through the mouth. What do we notice here? The snake is directly doing the verb delivers. So I'm thinking that this is active voice. The next sentence, The Outsiders was written by S.E. Hinton in the 1960s. I'm thinking that this is passive voice because The Outsiders is receiving the action written. The next one is, the picture was painted by Van Gogh. Again, we can see that the picture is receiving the action painted. Another way we can look at it is, was is a conjugation of the to be verb, and painted is in a past participle, so this must also be passive voice. Next, Bahar counted her books. Here, Bahar is doing the verb directly counted. So this also must be active voice. And lastly, the lesson was taught by their teacher. Here we see again was and a past participle. Another way to look at it is that the lesson is receiving the verb taught rather than directly doing it. So this must be passive voice. So now I'm going to do some practice. Can you make these active sentences passive? I'm going to read the sentence and then we can go over the answers after. The first active sentence is, the electrician mended the faulty wiring. So in order to make this passive voice, we have to say that the subject is receiving the action. So in this case, I would make the faulty wiring the subject and say that this is receiving the action mended. So I would say, the faulty wiring was mended by the electrician. So here, the faulty wiring was mended by the electrician. You can see again the conjugation of to be and the past participle mended. Next, many restaurants require reservations. I'm going to decide that reservations should be the new subject and that require is going to be the verb that reservations is going to receive. So, reservations are required by many restaurants. Reservations are required by many restaurants. So, reservations, and then you see again the conjugation of to be and then the past participle. Next, the comedian mocked that politician. So I'm going to make that politician the new subject who is receiving the verb mocked. That politician was mocked by the comedian. That politician was mocked by the comedian. You can see the conjugation of to be and the past participle mocked. Then Madame Curie discovered that element. Again, I'm going to make that element the new subject, who is going to be receiving the verb discovered. That element, and then I'm going to conjugate to be, that element was discovered by Madame Curie. That element was discovered by Madame Curie. And lastly, the sponge absorbed the liquid. I'm going to make the liquid the new subject, and the liquid will be receiving the verb absorbed. The liquid was absorbed by the sponge. The liquid was absorbed by the sponge. The conjugation of to be and the simple past tense. Okay, now that we've gone over grammar, I'm going to talk a little more about the book. You can keep these questions for yourself and answer them for yourself. So, what do you think of the characters in the book so far? And who is your favorite character? So, a note about the book and another discussion question that we'll be having is the theme. A theme is a subject or topic explored through the actions and events that take place in a book. In The Outsiders, some themes that are present is family and coming of age, or going from childhood to adulthood. Okay, here are some discussion questions that I'm going to read out for you, and you can think about them on your own time. So, the book begins with Ponyboy declaring that he wants to be like Paul Newman, because Paul Newman looks tough, which means cool, but he doesn't. Paul Newman was a famous actor known for playing tough rebel characters like a leader of a train robbing gang or a prisoner in jail who refuses to submit to the cruelties of the system for the sake of others. So, considering the themes present in the book, why do you think the author starts the book with Ponyboy stating this? How does it help characterize Ponyboy and his view of life? So remember, the themes present is coming of age, going from childhood to adulthood, and family. A theme we can consider is coming of age or going from childhood to adulthood when Ponyboy starts looking at himself and wanting to be tougher. So, two more discussion questions that I'm going to ask and you can think about on your own after the reading is, why do you think that the socials pick fights with the greasers when it can only harm them? So remember, the two classes, the socias and the greasers, often get into fights with each other. And why do you think that is? Or do you think that it's the other way around? It's the greasers who are picking fights with the socials. Who do you think is making the fights? Who do you think is making the arguments with them? The next question is, in chapter 6, Dally says that he does not want Johnny to go to jail because it will harden him. Considering the characterization of Johnny and Dally, do you think Dally is acting out of character? Why might Dally be more protective of Johnny? So, just some reminders. Dally is the one who has committed a lot of crimes, is tough, doesn't really listen to anyone else but himself. And also, Johnny had a really bad accident with one of the socias when he was jumped. Do you think that has anything to do with the way Dally treats Johnny? So that was it for the lesson of chapters 1 through 6 of The Outsiders. And if you were at the meeting, these are just assignments from then. But if you're just watching the video, you don't have to pay attention to this. Thank you.